Do. Singing to Shelley. Hey, Shelley. We just have to wait for a few more people to come on.
Shelley.
And I'm going to put it on speaker view. Are we muted? Nope, we're not. Cam, hey Dee. Good timing, everyone. How come you're on speaker view? I don't get that. Okay, we'll try. Can you hear us?
Give us a thumbs up if you can.
Kim's
yeah,
cool.
Sweet.
Awesome. I don't know why the speaker view is playing weird because I'm trying to record it at the same time. Oh, this is my weird hair too. Awesome. So stop laughing, Dee. It's not that funny. We'll just wait for a couple more people to jump on. But thanks for coming on this evening. And I'll try that again. No, it doesn't like us. We'll go gallery view. Okay, cool.
Dee's in the high seas. Her ship is just rocking.
How are we all going for a Thursday night? I almost said Tuesday. Is it a good Thursday night? Yeah, awesome. Oh dear. So while we're just waiting for a few people to jump on, because it is just 7 o'clock now, we'll go through our material. Should take about half an hour to go through, and then we'll do questions. But also just remember, if you're on your computer, you can do it on the phone as well. It's just a little bit trickier. The chat mechanism, if you've got a question that comes up, you can pop it in there. We might not answer it until the end, but we'll definitely, or if you've got anything to comment on or whatever, just pop it in the chat box, and that will sort of keep us interactive as well. So, oh, good. Let's make sure we're all there. Yep, here comes someone else. Awesome. All right. So it's now 7:01. So all the people who log in at 7:02, you guys are just going to miss out on the first bit. But, you know, hopefully you'll be able to tap into the recording. So here we are. This is Craig Goddard, my partner, and Linda Blythe. And we are going to introduce you to your backseat driver tonight. So we hope that you'll enjoy it and get something out of it. This is some of the material that we're going to be putting into the Unstuck and Unstoppable retreat, because it is something that's really important recognition. Once we understand what the backseat driver is, it's a very cool thing that we can do to sort of bring things back into perspective, really, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. And something that's always there. As soon as we start talking about it, you'll know 100% what we're talking about, but you might just not have been able to put a label to it or anything like that. So we're going to clear that up for you today and give you some tools that you can start using from tomorrow and bringing that into your life. So how do we want to start tonight?
Well, I think, you know, I think we all do know the backseat driver, just probably not as that. So maybe if we started looking at what the problem is. With,
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now you're probably aware that sometimes when you're thinking about things, it's not just a one-track thought. It's usually at least two voices in your head, if you like, that are conversing. So you'll often ask a question and then you'll get an answer. And that's sort of how we think. We don't really think in linear thought. We actually think in questions. And even right now, you're probably thinking a question and, you know, giving yourself answers. So and answers can come in ways that sound really awesome and amazing, and they could be something that you might call your higher self or your gut instinct or your heart or whatever. Other times the answer can be a bit bitchy. It can be like something that you really don't want to hear. So that second voice, where it's sort of quite judgmental, and it can be judgmental of yourself, and quite often is, or it can be judgmental of somebody else. That's that backseat driver. So they're not really necessarily constructive, but it's basically there because over your lifetime, and usually before the age of 7, you've actually formulated a whole heap of beliefs about who you are, what your orientation is in the world, where you fit into the big scheme of things. And the backseat driver basically helps us to reaffirm that, doesn't it? It's just basically trying to remind us who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And give us orientation in the world at that very young age. So,
yeah. And that's really important, because when we're little, we actually need to survive, don't we? So we depend on adults to get us from the day of our birth right through till we're actually old enough to fend for ourselves. Now, biologically, that may actually be in your teenage years. That might be okay. In this world, we tend to hang on to our kids until they're 18, 20, 25. We're still trying to boot them out the door, whatever. But we've got this thing where we really nurture the kids all the way through until we know that they can stand on their own 2 feet. So in that time that they're trying to survive, this is the function of this backseat driver, or the ego part of the backseat driver part of your ego. So it's actually trying to make sure that we're going to survive because we belong. Because if you don't belong to a tribe when you're growing up, then you can't go hunting on your own necessarily. You can't gather the food on your own. You're not going to necessarily be able to protect yourself from the predators and that sort of thing. So when we're in this current day and age, things are a little different. We live in houses. We've got, mechanisms that protect us. And even if our parents disappear, we've got other mechanisms in place that look after us. But still the biology is still there. And so there's a necessity to actually connect, belong to a group, particularly a family group, and to survive. And beyond that, also being loved is really important as well, because the more loved you are, the more food you get, the more, that sort of thing. So you actually got more chance of survival, very biological needs in there. And so in that, we start to formulate some beliefs about who we are so we can belong, and we start to believe some statements that we actually tell ourselves on a constant basis. Do you have any examples of any that you can think of?
Well, yeah, there's tons. I suppose one that's probably pretty common for a lot of us is, I'm not worthy of love, or things come to me easily, or any of the both ends of the spectrum sort of thing. These stories can start to formulate.
Yeah. What they've actually determined is the 2 biggest ones are I'm not loved and I'm not enough. So they're the things that we tend to tell ourselves. And I'm not enough can be in any capacity. It could be if you go for a new job and all of a sudden you've got new responsibilities, backseat drivers in the back going there saying, why are you doing this job? You're not really that good. The last person was fantastic. And that other person that went for that job, they are 10 times better than you are, even though that might not be true. But these are the sorts of things that your backseat driver is telling you so that you know where you fit into the world, not necessarily constructive. So it's quite often that we end up with, from this backseat driver, we end up with a whole heap of behaviours that we undertake, and we have a whole heap of statements that we tell ourselves to keep ourselves in that orientation that is safe and that we know and that is comfortable. There's the boys in the background. Keep moving. Oh, hand page. Family. We still have family. Yeah, so it's got a really important role in that respect. And our ego or our body feels threatened of its survival if it doesn't actually function. But then it can get out of whack, can't it?
Yeah, and it is. It's pretty powerful because, it serves us and it limits us, and we'll get into that as well. But I won't jump ahead, actually, but just to say that it's not keen on going anywhere anytime soon, so it's not about getting rid of it, and just that it'd rather die proving itself right than to be admitting that maybe it's not serving you, or maybe it's not right in this circumstance or that. It really wants to stay hard and fast. I know how things are, I know how the world works, and I know where you fit into it, or we fit into it. Yeah. and that's not going to change anytime soon, because our survival depends on it. So it really gets down to that base level of survival.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because we probably all know that person that is just so determined to be right. It doesn't matter what happens. They're the one that has to win the argument. They're the one that has to have all the answers. They're the one that's needs to know it all. And that it always comes down to, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? For them, they believe their happiness comes through being right, and then when they look at it later, maybe not so much. So really important that we make that distinction. But really, it's It's there because we need to survive, and we're not going to damp it out. As Craig said, there's no way you're going to get rid of it. You're going to be able to recognize it, and you're going to be able to use it in a powerful way, but you can't damp it out. You can't just keep doing the positive affirmations and reading the positive memes and staying away from the negative people. Well, there's negative people everywhere. You can't isolate yourself, and there's no point going and living in a cave. We just learn to get stronger within ourselves, and that way we can move forward powerfully. We're not scared of anybody. We're not worried about toxic people or toxic relationships in that way.
Yeah, and I think being aware too of how it works, what's going on within yourself. It's all about sort of taking responsibility and hence your power back, so that you can respond in the world the way you'd like to, and be powerful within your own life and create the life you love. So I think tonight's about sort of recognising what's going on, how some of those aspects of us that you may be unaware of, and how it's serving you and has served you, and how it can be limiting as well, and what we can do about it.
Yeah. Absolutely. So in serving you, it's really important that we recognize everything is dualistic. We often, as humans, our nature is we'll either label something as good or as bad. And so a lot of us, we run around going, oh, this crazy voice in my head is driving me nuts. It's a bad thing. Obviously, when we recognize that it has looked after us, and there are qualities to your backseat driver that have given you tools to use throughout your life. So if you deny that, then we end up sort of denying a really important part of ourselves. So it's really important that that part is acknowledged. It's not suppressed, because if you suppress anything, it's going to come out at some point. You'll have a big blow up, a blowout, or you'll have some sort of a health issue, or something will come up that will really get that energy moving, because we can't just keep suppressing things down. And it also has given us sound guidance at times, even though we didn't think so, but sometimes it's actually a bit of a combination of your heart speaking to you at the same time as your backseat driver. So it's really important that we recognize that it has served us, and that we don't want to get rid of it. It's really important. But in having said that, we're just going to touch on now how it hasn't served you, because that's obviously why we're here, because we're aware of it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be on this call. So what sort of things do you reckon is most important when we're seeing how our backseat driver is actually holding us back and that sort of thing?
Well, I think one of those key things is it tries to... It doesn't recognise your ability, your capacity to handle situations, because it was developed or primarily developed around in those younger years where you were vulnerable in the world, and you did rely heavily on your parents and those loved ones around you. Then these stories of limitation, I guess, were formed then. So now you're out in the world, and it's the parents may not be so prominent in your life, and it's still telling you the same thing. You need those people in your life, because you don't have the capacity yourself to handle things as they come up.
Absolutely.
And so as a result of that sort of story, that sort of example, you might get things where you find yourself needing to be very controlling in your life to the nth degree, and you might be trying to control people or circumstances. You may not take any action at all until you know that you've got everything thought through to the nth degree, and once you're satisfied, then you take action. Or it may just cause you to completely stall and do nothing. So this is where it can start to really limit you, because you're not kind of acknowledging that means if that's happening in your life, then you've got your backseat driver sitting firmly in your driver's seat, and
they've wedged you out. You're no longer in the driver's seat. You're sitting in the passenger seat somewhere. They're in control.
Control. That's right. Absolutely. And the results in your life are starting to reflect that part of you is in control, rather than the other part, the bigger part, the real you. Yeah.
And so it leads to things like self-sabotage, just to keep you safe and comfortable. So you start on a new project or something that's really important to you, shifting your health, shifting into a relationship or whatever, and then you'll do or say or just completely sabotage the whole process, and then you'll beat yourself up afterwards. Why did I do that? I was on such a great path with that. But it was just trying to keep you back in what you know. And the human brain loves solving problems. It loves creating problems so it can solve them. And quite often it likes creating the exact same problem it created last time, just so it can do it again, because it knows it can. So it's very comfortable. It's a very safe way to do it. It also makes you not very open necessarily to new people or to new ideas, tend to hold back, that sort of thing. So that for some people, that's a big thing with their backseat driver. And to a degree right now, it's a process where you need to probably write down, and whether you do it now or do it tomorrow, just a couple of the traits that you think your backseat driver has, because my backseat driver is quite different to Craig's backseat driver. He talked about control and making sure everything's all set up and right. My nickname for him is Mr. Safety, because he loves to make sure everything's organized. I'm more, let's just cruise along and see what happens, and if it falls apart, well, so be it, sort of thing. But my backseat driver is very different. My backseat driver is very much about worthiness issues, withdrawal, not belonging. There's a whole heap of stuff in there that if I let my backseat driver in control, she shows up really differently to when Craig's backseat driver comes up. So writing down some of those attributes so that you can understand what's going on when that person is showing up, then you recognize it and you can actually do something about it from that point. Whereas if we just go on automatic pilot, unconscious, it's very different. That's what everyone's been doing to this point, most likely, and most people out there in the world are as well. And then we don't have a choice. We're sort of stuck, and then we end up with things like self-doubt going on. We're questioning our actions, whether we're taking the right path. Our backseat driver loves to point out to us when we got it wrong. Like, you stuffed that up. It was totally your fault. You made the wrong decision. By the way, there is no such thing as a wrong decision, but that's another topic of conversation. And it wants you to conform so that you fit in and that you belong and that you can survive, and you've got to do it, the way everybody's doing it so that you can feel part of the bigger tribe. So, Craig, you're pretty familiar with your backseat driver, aren't you?
Yeah. Familiar.
Yeah. So, and just another thing, I don't know whether we will or not, but just so you know, we've actually given our backseat drivers a name. So it's actually almost able to be compartmentalized away from our normal, happy, heart-centered persona. So it's really easy to recognize when the backseat driver comes up and goes, there you are. Now, mine's actually called Wilma. So when Wilma pops up, I say, hey, Wilma, nice to see you. Thanks for coming, right? But then I can deal with Wilma and I can put her aside rather than actually let her take over the control of my vehicle, of where I'm heading in life. And so what sort of, don't you have to give out the whole cat in the bag? What sort of things do you find with your backseat driver?
Maxi.
And
I think the name is really helpful, because once you give it that name, it also allows that bigger part of you to be able to become the observer. So you observe that Max, or whoever you want to call it, but you do create that separation, so that you can observe, so that you can take that control and go, okay, I get it. Maxie, you're having a crack right now. Don't need you to drive. I've got this. Let's move forward in a positive way, So I think for me, other things that Maxie's pretty keen on is not taking responsibility, blaming others. If the shit hits the fan, wasn't my fault. God, anybody else can take that, and there's all sorts of ways in which or that part of me will create blame of others, and there's judgment. Whether it's judgment of myself and or judgment of others will kick in. And when these things are happening, I can safely say that aspect of myself is Maxi. And so now I need to look at how I can approach this situation differently. And just knowing that that's what's going on is massive, because it can flick you out of limitation and back into your heart, into a loving space. Because that big part of yourself, which is the true part of yourself, the real you, is only interested in love, is interested in the betterment of yourself and everybody else, and mutual wins, So if that's not going on, then it informs you about what might be going on, and you can then do something about it.
So you can imagine that Maxi, his backseat driver Maxi actually complements my backseat driver Wilma really well, because Wilma loves to be a victim. Wilma loves to, it's all my fault, and I'm the one that's caused all this problem, and woe is me, and all this stuff. So when he's out there doing so it's all everyone else's fault, Wilma just goes and runs with it. So you know, you can imagine how that impacts on a relationship. Whereas once we did the work around this backseat driver, we totally identified it, we can see it straight away, and it just actually does not show up anymore. There's no more of this push-pull sort of relationship. And in fact, sometimes if Maxie comes out, I'll say, "Hey, Max," instead of Craig, and he'll say, you know, "G'day, Wilma," or, you know, that sort of thing. So it's sort of fun to call out each other out on it, and we can coach each other in a way that's not confrontational, because all we're doing is saying, "Hey, just so you know, you dropped into a really powerless state there, and you know, we're all about moving forward together." So it works really well, but it works well on yourself as well. A number of times I pick out Wilma, you know, she's coming up less and less now, but it's, you know, certainly something you can easily identify in that way. So now, as I said before, we don't want to get rid of our the backseat driver, because it's not something that it hasn't served us. It serves us quite well. But we do need to know how to deal with it when she shows up, or he shows up, other than just saying, "Oh, there you are." There needs to be a little bit more in there, because, as I said before, if you keep repressing it, it's going to come out somewhere, whether you have that blow up with a family member or your kids, or you're in the shopping center and you're screaming at someone because they stole your car park, whatever. It'll come out, or it'll come out health-wise. A client that I know, she had a skin issue, eczema, because she wasn't acknowledging what was going on with hers. So what do you reckon is the key thing for us to do when we see our backseat driver coming up?
Well, I think one really powerful thing is just acknowledgement of that. Okay, this is what's going on right now. I see that, you know, and that acknowledgement seems to take the sting out of it, or the power out of it, because often once the backseat driver's plonked in your driver's seat, it feels like those feelings are all powerful, and you're powerless to do anything about them. Because I'm stuck in this situation and it's shit and there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah,
I'm just
sort of
got
like
to fight.
automatic pilot sort of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you're not aware, if you don't sort of acknowledge and observe, then you are kind of powerless to do anything else about it. But once you do that, pretty quickly, if not immediately, it starts to kind of just loosen up a little bit. And when that happens, you start to get some other options with how you can handle this situation. And they come very naturally and quickly, because you've opened the door, if you like, to those options.
Gives you a bit of breathing space to sort of rethink it. Yeah. I think also what I found really powerful was when you acknowledge, it's not just a matter of saying, "Oh, there you are," but also almost a gratitude to say, "Look, and thanks for being there. I've got this. It's okay. We're safe. Everything's cool. I know you've protected me in the past, but now just, you know, you're safe. Just pop in the back and have a little sleep now, because I've got this. I can drive. It's all good."
Yeah.
So, and then, you know, from that point, that openness that you talk about, you know, that, I don't know about you guys, but when you're feeling really open to things, you know, I just find them much more creative. Just new ideas come in, and new opportunities, just in a way of thinking about things, and things that could be of great potential and great help, not only to myself, but other people, because that's part of my life mission. So I find it really cool to be in that space, rather than that reactive, responsive, you know, it's got to, when some X happens, Y has to happen. You know, it's not like that when you actually start to observe the situation and go from there. So, you know, the goal is basically to stop them doing the driving. It's really just to bring ourselves consciously creating our own outcomes by being in the driver's seat ourselves, and just, you know, settling the whole thing down, calm the farm, if you like.
and when you do that as well, sometimes inspired action will come through to you. Other times there's no need for you to do anything. Often when the backseat driver's on the go, it's telling us, you've got to do something right now. You've got to take charge, or you've got to get out of here, or you've got to distract yourself. And these are some of the strategies that the backseat driver is pretty typical for kicking your way.
Yep.
So distraction might be a big one. But before I go on, what I was going to say about it is sometimes it's just nothing needs doing. Once you recognize that, you just chill and you just let it do what it's got to do. But you're not responsible to, you're not obliged to take action in every situation. So once you realize that, that can be quite empowering too, because it's not your responsibility to take action every time. So yeah, just being aware of that. Yeah.
I was going to mention that because Wilma's one of her big strategies is distraction. Wilma, if she's really upset because she withdraws and she likes to be the victim, but then she doesn't want to dwell on stuff. So what she likes to do, I'm not a TV watcher, but she loves the TV and like commercial TV with complete dribble on there. She loves that stuff. She loves eating really crappy food. She loves sugar. She loves, that's her way of self-care. Now, we talk very much about self-care and how important that is, particularly in the retreat. We'll be covering that in big detail as well, but not by sitting back and thinking that by eating a bag of chips or a block of chocolate, that is not self-care. That's definitely doing harm to yourself. Feels good at the time, 5 minutes later doesn't feel so good, but that's something that she does as well. So and times when that shows up is often when she's feeling a little bit lonely or left out of something, because another thing, she's a victim and she doesn't belong. So if she's feeling like that, that's a really bad combination for her. So what I found is that the best strategy for her in that scenario is actually to do some artwork. Now, I'm not an artist, but I actually don't mind doing a bit of colouring or some painting or whatever. And I only do it for me. I'm not producing anything for any other reason other than to just create. And if I'm doing that, I find myself in a whole different plane, which again, I've always denied because it's not important. It's not doing work that would be recognized as remuneratable or valuable in the world or whatever. And then I realized how valuable it is, because if I'm not taking the time out to what we call sharpen the saw, which is basically if you're chopping down a forest, you got to sharpen your saw every now and again, otherwise it's going to be twice the effort to get the same amount of wood down. So sharpening the saw in a way that allows your brain to just settle, and then you come back into the real work, for want of a better word, and boy, can you hit that stuff really hard and fast, and your productivity, your creativity, your accessibility to your own resources has gone up massively. So now I recognize that you know, Wilma's time is much better spent with a paintbrush in her hand than a chocolate bar and the remote control. It's been a massively empowering step to take.
And the effect of doing that for Linda and Wilma is that effectively what she does is she takes Wilma out of the driver's seat. She sits herself back in the driver's seat and then moves back into her heart and out of her head. And that's where then all the inspiration comes from. So it's a very powerful thing to do, and we'll help you to discover what is it that's true for you. What sorts of things, you know, do you really love? You might already know what they are, but we'll show. If you do, great, and if you don't, we'll help you with that. But we'll also show you how it is, why it is, and how that it's important and how powerful it is that you access it often, because you're starting to cultivate, you know, spending more time in that greater aspect of yourself and less time with Wilma or whoever in the driver's seat.
Yeah, and you just start to see that they hardly show up at all. You're getting around the world in this amazing open space, don't you? So it's a great way to get around.
Yeah.
So anyway, as I said, we'll cover that and go deeper into it with our Unstuck and Unstoppable retreat materials. We're going to go right into the backseat driver, because there's a whole heap of stuff we can uncover from there. And when you leave, you'll actually have a full understanding of who your backseat driver is, how to look after him or her, and what your strengths are, what sort of things that your heart's really looking for, which will be amazing. Now, we've got a few minutes, so if anyone has any questions, you can either wave your hand and I'll unmute you, or pop it in the chat box and we'll answer any questions there. Hopefully it was relatively straightforward, but I'd love to hear some questions or address anything or any thoughts that you might have, and we can go from there.
And while you're thinking of any questions, Kim, is that you? Did you have something? No?
No.
While you're thinking of any potential questions, just maybe start thinking about, you don't have to say it now or ever, but start thinking about a name for your backseat driver.
Yeah, I know at least one person on the call's got one.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's an awesome one. Yes, very good. Actually, I'm going to have to take this out because we won't be able to hear you guys speak. Yeah. Might change a little bit. So hopefully you can still hear us, yeah? You can still hear us? Yes, great.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So Kim is asking, is it possible to have more than one backseat driver? Really good question. I actually had that one too, because when I was going through the work, I thought, well, one of them's really wimpy and she's the victim and she wants to just run away. And there's this other one that wants to actually whip that one's ass and say, stop being a wimp and get into action and get stuff happening. And yeah, so I thought there was actually two, but actually it is the same one, but they're just it's just what we call fractionated. So they're displaying two opposite ends of a similar trait, but they're just beating each other up, which just becomes ridiculous. And again, when you start to do the work, what you'll notice is one will become more dominant than the other, and then it becomes a little easier to nurture that side and actually bring her back or him back into the back seat and just have a sleep. So you will find that one will dominate over the other, but it is actually just the one. But yeah, good question, because I had exactly the same question when I started working on this as well. Dee, are you there? Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Are you there, Dee?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I know I put you on the spot. Oh, yeah, you can. I can.
Yeah.
I know I put you on the spot, but can you shed any light on any insights you've got since you've been working with your backseat driver?
I recognise when she's there. I've given her a name and I've called her Iffy.
Iffy.
So, Iffy. So
Yeah,
when Iffy turns up, I go, bugger her off. Yeah, I don't want to talk to you, or, yeah, I know that you're trying to control me, and just having that recognition that there is another part of me, and it's okay to have it too. Yeah,
absolutely.
But
and that'll be the next
definitely overriding when I feel she's coming out, and putting her back in a place.
Yeah, cool. So, and as I said, that's what we'll work on next with you, is it'll be bringing her into a state where you can acknowledge her without repressing her too much, because eventually she will pop up and she'll rear her ugly head and you'll go, whoa, where'd that all come from?
You start to form a relationship that's a really good, workable relationship with each other, and where it's just empowering, and we'll show you how that part of yourself can in fact literally empower what you're going for in life. So you start to become pretty excited and grateful to have that aspect of yourself, because it can add fuel to your creation. So we'll go into it, but it's pretty cool.
Okay.
So, and we'll probably going a little deeper here, but that is sort of the next level, because most programs that you go through, they actually talk about these sorts of things, and they talk about basically what they're trying to do is get rid of the stress in your life. They're trying to get rid of the psychological tension, and then everyone goes, oh yeah, that feels really good, I don't feel stressed about that situation anymore. But the problem is that if you do it too hard and everything just feels mellow, you actually feel a bit dead on the inside, because you've actually taken out the bit of tension that you need to create the next level. If you've got no pain going on, you've got no reason to go for pleasure. You don't have any goals. You get really comfortable, and comfortable is actually a really unsafe space to be if you're a person that likes to grow and expand. And I would argue that every person on this planet is here to grow and expand. So after a while, you actually feel a little dead on the inside, because you don't have that next thing to go for. And so, but we need that tension not to be stressful to the point where you're just cycling around and keep reliving the same stuff over and over and over again, but that we've got something that's directed, that we can actually drive it to move into the creation. So again, that's a whole other level of mastery that that we'll be handling in that retreat as well. And
Thank you, Dee.
Thanks, Dee. That's awesome. I'll just mute you now if I can. Yep. And is it normal to have a full conversation with yourself, backseat driver, and a full conversation? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no problem at all. And yes, you're never lonely, because there's always something going on in there, isn't there? And don't worry, you're not crazy. We all think the same way. As I said at the beginning, we think in questions. We're constantly asking questions, answering questions. But sometimes we ask very disempowering questions, like, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And then, of course, your backseat driver jumps up and says, because you're an idiot.
Or because it's their fault.
Yeah, it's not my fault. It was that person's fault. So anyway, do we all get something out of that? If you did, give me a thumbs up. Yep.
Nice.
No, I'm going to thumbs up. Yay, awesome.
Cool.
Hopefully, yeah, I really hope,
Nice.
Thank you.
Andy.
Great. And look, we'd really love to run some more little ones. So if you're interested, just keep an eye out on the Facebook group, the Unstuck and Unstoppable group, and we'll pop them up. And if you've got any special questions, we might be able to address those too in these things. But I'd like to keep them all nice and short. I reckon half an hour is pretty good on an evening call. I think that's plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming along. We really appreciate having you here, and look forward to joining you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.
Have a good night.